Feature Friday.
The freshest.
Right, so I asked you guys if you could kindly send me videos of Arijit in a more classical setting, right? And you guys pulled through with one of these videos. They actually sent a couple, but I chose this one, which is him in 2006, a young Arijit, singing, purely classical, and he has the harmonium in front of him, the harmonium in front of him. He looks younger, because he's younger. He looks like a baby. And he's going to be singing pure classical music here. Okay. Because a lot of you guys were saying, you should check out some of that work because it's truly impressive. And it does put into perspective, or more context perhaps, into why he's become who he is today.
That makes sense. I love a good origin story.
I do want to say also, shout out to everyone getting merchandise. It does mean the world. Go to featurefridaystore.com. It does support the podcast that way. And also, it is limited edition. So after this...
It'll go
after
away.
February, you can't get it again. So thank you for everyone getting your merch.
All right, yes. Oh, what happened?
Is it on?
Yes. Somebody stick it or dancing.
Time signatures are crazy.
Bro, that singing technique is wild. It's actually really economic. Because thank you. Because he's working with a lot of twang, so his larynx are set higher, and a lot of the air is coming down through the nose, which actually reduces the amount of air that comes out when you're singing. It creates this really thin, full setting. But the modulation that happens thereafter, that's what really captivated me. Because also the positioning of the tongue, it's really peculiar. If you pay attention, look at that. It's really narrow on the sides and it's lifting right in the middle. That is completely unusual. But then again, unusual to me, that have never been exposed to classical singing, Indian classical singing before.
But we've seen some of the ones that are singers that are... Well, I don't know where my phone is. Well, some of the singers that are like... What the...
There it is.
Sitting on it. Some of the singers that are considered some of the best, Indian classical Indian singers. So one of the things that... Like KJ Udas, for example, when we discovered him and we were discussing things like that, it's like... Some of the techniques applied in that moment or showcased in that moment are obviously very unique to the Indian music industry in terms of classical music. However, what people were mentioning in the comments of this, not of this specific performance, but about Arijit, is that you are also seeing like an evolution technically of the singer too, right?
Of course.
However, he was at a, like this is really good by people who are like, what would you call him? Like critiques
really
of classical. They were quite impressed by this stuff. So everything I'd imagine that he was doing here, it's highly regarded.
I would think so. Yeah. See, because his tongue positioning changes.
Yeah. It's purposeful.
It is purposeful. It's really highly melodic too. Gosh, the singing phrases are so long.
Breathe. the guy in the back is let me just enjoy.
That's really interesting. The shift from singing voice into speaking voice didn't actually change, didn't reset in the larynx, which is usually what happens. Actually, it's a really great diverting technique to take away tension from the larynx when you have been exposed to a really exhausting singing phrase.
Like a belt.
Like a really strenuous belt, or something that requires a set position larynx that you can't really shift when you're singing. Going back to your speaking voice actually will reset and take away that tension. In this particular case, though, maintained its position. So the speaking purpose was basically just to communicate, not to take away tension. That is usually the way that you would approach it with such a strenuous movements and shifts in it, how I would approach classical singing.
If I was gonna guess on a region of the world in which its people sang before they spoke, would be in India.
I would think so.
Right.
And I think the regimented way of learning classical singing really depicts the way that people speak.
Yeah, that's really weird.
It really dictates where the melodic and bounciness of the language actually comes from. And those that sing classical Indian music speak a different manner too. Speak in a different way too. The way the larynx get positioned. Like I was looking at some interviews by Lata Mangeshkar, and the way that she spoke actually resonated a lot to the way that she sang.
Mental, right?
Which I think it comes from the discipline in which you get taught. Obviously, she was the best at this specific genre, but it's really interesting to watch. There are certain disciplines and technicalities that are literally ingrained in their being.
Right.
That are not just adjusted to the singing, you know?
I see. Yeah, so there would be an argument for that.
I would think so. He's always been very charming, hasn't he? Everybody's sitting on the floor. How cool!
So if you know what possibly this could be, do let us know.
The singing phrases are so long. You see?
It's the same, right?
The larynx are set in the same position. So that's why he finds the singing once he has spoken so easily as well. Because these larynx actually haven't shifted. They actually haven't changed.
And that's due to classical Indian music
Singing
vocal
technique, yeah.
of the larynx not shifting.
The larynx being static.
Mental. And that's the best example for that. Great recommendation, may I say.
Yeah, it ignites a lot. It reignites a lot of questions about the discipline behind learning to sing classical Indian music. Because there's not only the differences in which I have been taught to sing, but there's definite intricate questions in holding melody. And why is it that different classical singers sound different to one another when the rag, the scales, the technique is basically the same? But what is it that makes them so individualistic in the same genre?
Right.
And I think it all comes down to the nature of melody. It all comes down to their artistry development overall.
Sure.
In his particular case, though, he is a giver of melody. So he would. These are just my perspective. They can be completely wrong.
Hypothesis so far.
Basically. But I think he would prioritize melody rather than complexity and maybe crazy rhythmicalities, because that's what he shines at the most.
I see.
And it's like a natural inclination.
Let's keep watching, and then I wanted to show you something.
Where's the breath? How they explore the whole scale. You know, if you pay attention to the larynx, they don't move. Such a relaxed demeanor. The people at the back.
Oh fudge!
Oh, what an ending!
I did wanted to show. I thought it was appropriate also to show you maybe a bit of this, because one of the coolest things about him, it's obviously seeing how his classical approach to things translated then into this absolute fucking enigma of a pop. Playback, most popular songs, sensation sounds mixed with alternative. And then you start seeing even that, like in this video that we got sent. I don't know if you start seeing obviously influences of instruments again from classical, so much more intertwined, and it makes so much more sense. This is why I asked to watch these other types of videos, because I wanted to find out the root of everything. Especially someone who I enjoy so much, like Arijit's music. He is one of the few artists that I've been finding myself that I can play his music so often, like in like a repetitive kind of like a fucking mantra. Like I can play him and it's just lovely. But seeing the root of everything, obviously, which is classical Indian classical music, and then when you look at the combination of both genres, right, with the foundation being classical Indian, that's why he's able to reach this level of alternative music that's so high. And then you see the obvious translation from Indian classical singing to in the manner he sings, which one of the things that impressed me the most at the beginning. This is kind of like a recap of why the things I noticed the first time we checked him out, which is like the elongated phrases.
Singing phrases,
maybe not due to the language, but due to the classical Indian music.
The foundation,
The emphasis on utilizing instrumentalization, which is so purely native of India, it's not just because of culture, because it's part of his background musically.
That's right.
To utilize and then create a modernized take on things. Like, you see these progressions.
And you see this, the breath technique is so Unlike the previous video that we watched, and this was in 2018, and the previous video was
2006.
in 2006. But then you see the foundation and the discipline that is ingrained in the learning of classical Indian music, that those things become part of the singer. They are not a technique that you pull out of a toolbox. No, they're integrated in their being. So therefore, they can easily be translated into fusion music like this particular pieces. So if you move forward a little bit, you can actually see the breathing flare through the nose. So if you think from a Western technique, that would be a clear tell of usage of twang. So the larynx lift up and then they project the air through the nose down and not so much through the mouth. So it's all up here and it creates this really cool nasal type of sound. But it's really nicely modulated in Arijit's case.
Place is packed, eh?
When you hear that twanging is really well modulated. I would also be losing it though.
It also explains so much of his stability live singing wise. He's one of those artists in which his ability to perform music live, it's so unquestionable given his background.
That's right. And it's unfailing, which is the thing that called our attention the most right before we discovered this type of background. So that's why, going back to the beginning, where those rare footages of your favorite singers, it's so enigmatic, because then you are able to understand where a lot of their foundations come from. And that actually depicts a lot of where the singer will be in the future too, because that not only dictates where their natural inclinations go to, but also what they like the most.
Yeah.
So
where their habits come from.
That's right, especially the breath control that you see in Arijit live. Even when he's walking around playing several instruments and understanding
sweating buckets and running around,
but his breath is so stable, and that comes obviously from the all the classical training that he's had, and it all makes sense now. You know?
I've never heard Ena Sona before, so if you'd like us to check it out, do let us know. We are planning of doing an Arijit special podcast, given our what would you call it, affinity to him, the fact that we genuinely enjoy his music so much off camera. But the problem is we can't listen to much of music off camera because we want to share it.
That's right.
So it would be really cool to do a podcast, and then in those podcasts we could do those songs that I know you guys want us to, like the studio versions, so we could do those comparisons in comparison to the live versions. But let us know what you thought about it, and goodbye, guys.
That's right.